Welcome to The One Inside, an internal family systems podcast. I'm your host, Tammy Sollenberger. I'm excited that you and all of your parts have taken time to be with me and all of my parts. If you are a coach, a client, a therapist, if you are in business or education, and you're curious about the IFS model, you are in the right place. Now, let's see what happens on today's podcast. Hey everyone. In today's episode, I chat with Shelly Johnson. Shelly is the author of the fantastic book, The Parts Inside of Me. I would describe this book as an illustrated poem. I would highly recommend you get the book. I think we do a really good job of describing some of the pictures, but I think once you hear the episode, you're going to just need to run out and buy this book because it's so good and it's so beautiful, and I think you're really going to like it. Shelly and I have spent about half of the episode talking about the power of self, and we had met during COVID, which is still during COVID, but it was when it was we were more in the quarantine, and so we talked about being triggered, and she says that self is able to stay out of the chaos. And I loved that. Self is able to stay out of the chaos. And gosh, there's been so much chaos lately. So we spend about half of the time, half of the session talking about the power of self and our parts, and then we spend about half of it walking through her book. And Shelly really shares her powerful story, her personal story, in between those two halves. Shelly, at the beginning of her book, shares two really meaningful quotes. One is by Dick, and he says, "If you love what's in your way, they will transform." I love that one. We talk about that. And then the other one is by Michi Rose, who says, "I believe that there is a divine spark in every human being, although it may be buried deeply." Wouldn't that be nice right now if we all really believed that in the people that we watch the news, and that could trigger so much anger and hurt and rage and confusion? But if we really believed that inside of every human being, you, listener, and me, and the people we see on the news, if we believe there's a divine spark in every human being, although it may be buried deeply. So much is just relevant to everything that's happening. I hope you all are well, and it's starting to be summer where I live, so that makes me very, very happy, and I can feel like I have a little more access to self. One more thing before we go. Shelly also says, at the very beginning, we talk about self being this experience of falling into the arms of presence. And I loved that. I just feel like what a message that we need to hear right now, and we need to share with our families and our friends and with our communities and our world. Hope everyone's okay. Enjoy this one.
Hi, Tammy.
Hey girl, how are you?
I'm doing good. It's a crazy time in the world.
I know.
It really is. It's an interesting time, and there's so much. I just think there's a big invitation for us, like as people, humanity, as clinicians, practitioners, to really just kind of just embrace, kind of in some ways, the silence, the spaciousness, and just try to kind of fall into the arms of presence and really use that time to go inside and just see what's there.
I am feeling this falling into the arms of presence is incredibly, I just felt my whole system just, because like as we're talking about it, I'm like, yeah, blah, blah, blah. I'm getting all like activated as we're talking about it. But just hearing you say that, I'm like, yeah.
Yes.
Right, because then if I'm falling into the arms of presence, those parts of me that are trying to be such a good girl and trying to listen to the parent, and like that, actually presence can be with those parts.
Absolutely. And when we get triggered, which is what everybody's been getting with this with this health crisis, you know what I mean?
Yeah.
Is we can actually take the lead from self and just really, really be held kind of by self and just lean into self right now. And I can feel just the in my body, just that like a melting feeling. And a lot of times when we're triggered, we're taken out of presence.
Talk about that a little bit.
Yeah. So anytime that we get emotionally triggered, it takes us out of being present. And it usually is perceived as something that's negative or really, really bad. Or, I used to see my emotions as kind of scary, because you feel like something's off, but you don't know what's going on.
Yeah.
But it's like, if we can just maybe just kind of think about it like, you know what, my emotions are kind of my teachers. Whatever comes up, is really a portal, a door into the immediacy of the moment to what's going on with my parts. They're my teachers. And if I can actually listen to them and connect with them and be with them, then they don't feel so hidden and isolated, like they're not being seen or heard. And we just notice when we connect with parts, there's just this gradual de-escalation that happens from like our head to our heart, in a sense, and everything just kind of calms down. Right?
Beautiful. Yeah. Yeah.
Yeah. And we need that more than anything right now.
I have a part that's saying, it's so agreeing with you, and it's telling me how that makes more of a difference than knowing the right answer.
Yes.
Like knowing the clear expectation that is actually what's going to make more of a difference in my body and in my mood and in my day-to-day being than
Right.
knowing the right answer. I'm putting right in quotation in
Yeah.
air quotes, air quotes. Yeah, that actually makes a bigger difference.
Yeah, because presence is really like, our self energy is truth, and it allows us to be in the moment.
Yeah.
And instead of our parts being this scary thing, we can kind of just like really just invite them, in a sense, to just tell us what's going on. Like, what is going on? What is coming up for you in this moment? And just really, really be with that.
Well, and I love that because it's an unblending, right? What's going on. And
Yes.
then it's also, as you're saying that, it's not an analytical what's going on. It's not like I'm thinking about what is happening. Why am I acting this way? What's going on with me?
Right.
Da, 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 da. What do I need? Da, da, da.
Yeah,
And it's not
definitely.
that.
Yeah, yeah, which is typically, pre-IFS, that's where my head went.
Yeah, me too. Yeah.
Why am I feeling this way? And there was just so much angst to it,
Yeah.
but I couldn't be in relation with it.
Yeah. It's like the sense of urgency to figure it
Yeah,
out, to fix it. Da, 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 da. Right.
yes.
Right.
Yeah,
Wow.
and then
Yeah.
being a therapist makes that even like I really got to figure this out, you
Yeah,
know?
right, right. Yeah, so I love that idea of saying inside, what is happening? What do you need? What just happened in this moment? And
Yeah,
listening with your heart.
yeah. And sometimes I'll even ask, just different parts that come up. I'll just, see if I can sit with the part and just ask, what truth in this moment from this part needs to be understood by me?
Oh, I love that.
What is
I
the wisdom in
mm,
this moment that needs to be understood by me?
mm,
Because we know there's something there. Yeah, it's what I'm
mm.
feeling, what I'm holding is it's a really interesting time, I think, just to have a podcast, with just, I think, everything going on in the world. Like my parts have been doing so much inner reflection
Mm.
You know, I've done a lot of going inside, you know, and I've kind of used this time to kind of do that because
Mm.
normally, you know, pre-COVID, like, you know, life is really crazy and it's really distracting and there's a lot of noise and it's really easy to get caught up in that,
Mm.
right? And it can
Yeah.
make it harder to kind of slow down. And so I felt like it was just like a big invitation for humanity, for human consciousness to kind of lift
Mm.
in a way. And I feel like as soul centered leaders, we have just, this is just my intuition, is we have just important lessons to listen to and learn to just kind of raise the frequency of our whole planet.
Mm. I love that because if it's not the, I read this the other day, this addiction to busyness. And so if the addiction to busyness, which I can still be busy at home plenty, but
Mhm.
if that has been lifted, then what is there? And I allow for that. Like if I say, okay, well, I don't have to travel, you know, I don't have to take my son to school, and then I'm seeing a little bit less patients, and I'm not running like I normally run,
Mhm.
then that busyness is lifted. And if I allow for that, then there will be extra space, not just extra time,
Mhm.
but extra space and extra energy potentially,
Mhm.
and to go inside and to have
Mhm.
more reflection and be with my
Yeah.
parts that are scared or parts that don't know what's happening or parts that feel confused or whatever that is, and
Yes.
be with that differently. I love that.
Yeah, absolutely. And you know, I was really appreciating you talking about just the busyness because the busyness is actually one of the biggest things for me. It's really a big part of my story, actually, because my own personal story. Because first of all, I'll introduce myself. My
I
name,
forgot to do the window and the whole thing. I forgot.
I'll just do.
You started
We were
talking.
just getting really present there. Yeah.
It
So
felt so good.
yeah, it did. It's like you don't want to leave it. So my name is Shelly Johnson, and I'm a licensed therapist. I live in Des Moines, Iowa, which is kind of a big suburb in Iowa. And I run my own private practice called Compassionate Arts Therapy. And I just absolutely love my work and my clients. And I use IFS almost exclusively. You know, I went to grad school in Chicago and so in the like this would be early 2000s, and at that time I was really interested in kind of Jungian psychology and shadow work and kind of exploring the darkness and aspects of ourself that we typically reject. And I had a lot of professors though that were of other theoretical preference. They had other theoretical preferences, Adlerian, cognitive behavioral, and Rogerian, even though that's not really a theory, it's a style in a way. So I was working towards the end in my practicum and internship. I was doing my clinical work at a trauma hospital in Chicago. And I had a really good friend of mine in graduate school that said to me, have you ever heard of internal family systems? I said, no, I've not heard of that. And she said, well, she was in her internship and she said, we had this amazing psychologist that came and spoke in front of the group. And his name is Dr. Dick Schwartz. And he developed this model. And I need to tell you about this model. And so, you know, like I said, I'm in the end, right? I'm thinking that I know, how I like oriented wise, like how I'm going to, what theoretical preferences I had. And then she gave me this book, internal family systems therapy, the red book,
The red book's right.
red book,
The
right?
red book, yes, the
Right,
red book,
right,
yes.
by Dr. Dick Schwartz. And I honestly and literally stayed up most of the night reading that book because I was so intrigued by the concepts and it just made so much internal sense to me.
Mhm.
But So in the 15 years moving forward, I really wanted to get trained in IFS, but I really kind of became a workaholic. And busyness, like really, really, like I became so blended with just that really busy manager part. It was a very, very busy agency-based therapist. It really led to, I had really little understanding of self-care, how to set boundaries for myself, right? That would be, that would help keep me really present and really healthy in the work. And so what happened is I seriously had kind of a breakdown, and it led to PTSD. It was extreme burnout is what that looked like. And so the universe literally gifted me with this incredibly necessary time out to do some soul searching and reflection. And I had to take a step back from doing therapy because I needed to think about if I'm going to come back, which I'm in love with therapy. So I kind of thought I would, but I didn't know. And I thought, if I'm going to come back, I need to think about, like, how am I going to re-enter this field in a way that's going to be like really healthy for me personally and really, really healthy for me professionally. Because how I was functioning wasn't going to work, right?
Yeah.
So that's when I decided to take level 1, and I did that in Chicago. And then I did really very quickly right after that. Level 2 was in Santa Cruz, California. And then level 3 was in Austin, Texas. And then I PA'd in Chicago for almost a year. And I just really, really haven't looked back.
In the middle of all of that, did you get to know your busy protector parts?
Oh my goodness, yes. Oh my goodness, yes, Tammy, absolutely. And, I had also just a real rescuing kind of part that would see people in crisis. And I have this maternal rescuer that's like, if a baby's crying, I'm going to go run for it and try to pick it up and comfort it. And I thought of that as, it's really well intentioned, right? But it doesn't leave a lot of energy for the therapist, because you're constantly rescuing. And then, my overworking manager just didn't know how to slow down. And the model really, really, really teaches you to slow down. And it really, really healed me. I mean, it's a real testament to the efficacy of the model. It healed me in a profound way.
To link this to busy and COVID and all that, is it's like, without the busyness, like, am I smart? Am I likable? Am I lovable? Do people think about me? Like, all that. If I'm not busy, then who am I?
Who am I? And Tammy, I can so relate with that because my identity was totally tied up in what I can produce and perform.
Yeah.
And that was it. Like, that was my life.
Yeah.
And I had so many other roles and like so many other parts, right?
Oh, yes.
That wasn't the only member of the family. That was just one.
Right. But when that one's driving the bus, it seems like they're the only member. They are pretty powerful. Yeah. I love that though, right? Because it's like, right, there are other parts. It's not the only member of the family. And there's also other really important, interesting parts. Do you know the Enneagram?
I do.
What Enneagram number are you?
I'm number 2.
Number 2. So you're a helper. Okay.
Yep.
Yeah.
Yep. I had somebody administer that to me. I was drinking wine at the time, and she thought it was we hadn't seen each other in like 5 years. And she's like, I think this is a good idea. And I was like, I don't know about that, but we did it. I was like, okay, this was semi-productive, you know?
Yeah.
Yeah. Yeah.
Yeah.
Totally a helper.
Yeah. Yeah.
Totally a helper.
Right. And so then you would burn out helping because that's
Oh,
your identity and that's how you
totally.
get love. And yeah, yeah.
Totally. Totally.
Yeah. And I wonder if you're also a wing three. Did you get into that? Like, so my guess, not that you're supposed to do this, but my guess is you're a two with a wing three, which is that like identity is in performing and producing and
Yes.
that, yeah,
Yes.
yeah.
It almost like perfectionistic.
Yeah, right, which is a one, right? One has that. So if you're two, you can have both of those wings can kind of go back and forth.
Yeah. I'm
So
in those early
yeah. Right, right.
numbers, Tammy.
Right. Well, so then that makes a lot of sense. So when you're in an unhealthy place, that
Mm,
it could two wing one with a little bit
yeah.
of one, a little bit of three, then that could feel really uncomfortable because you've got the helper with a two, and then the perfectionism of a one, and then
Yeah.
the striving of the three. Oh, no wonder
Yeah.
you get burned out. Yeah. But
Yes.
but
Yeah.
healthy, it's beautiful. I feel jealous
Yeah.
of twos because I'm like, they're the nicest numbers. They're helping everybody. Everyone likes twos.
Yeah. And unfortunately, the train had to go off the tracks for me
Yeah,
to
yeah.
be able to really, really embrace this model and embrace the spirit of it and really learn about myself in a way that I just never had the time to do before,
Mm,
you
which is
know?
amazing. It's like what we're saying about this COVID thing. It's like what a gift that burnout was, which I'm sure was horrible at the time,
Oh,
but it
it's
really
terrible.
opened up space for you to take the training and do
Totally did.
everything. Yeah, that you didn't
It
have before.
I didn't have it before. No, no,
Yeah.
I didn't have it before. And so for me, when I say the universe gifted me, it really was a gift.
Yeah.
It really was a
Yeah.
gift and it was a gift that I needed. And it's a gift, once you have it, you want to share it, right?
Yeah,
You want to share it
definitely.
with others.
So you wanted to share it with others, and so you wrote this book.
I wrote this book. I wrote this book called
Let's take a look at the
Yeah,
book.
The
Oh
Parts
my gosh, I
Inside of
love it.
Me. I am so blessed with this book because I'll tell you, in all honesty, it came to me almost faster than I could write it down,
Wow.
Tammy. Really, I would be driving back and forth on my drives to Chicago, and that's 6 hours one way from Iowa. And I would during that time just be kind of trying to listen to parts and just see who was there. And I started meeting these parts of myself, and then the words just really just started flowing to this story.
Mm,
And I had to literally pull over sometimes on exits, the side of the road, write on a receipt, write on a napkin what was coming to me.
wow.
And it was very visual, and the words were very strong. And so it just like turned into this like beautiful, poetic narrative.
Mm,
And
mm,
when I think about it, it was really my process of unblending. It was a big unblend.
mm. Well, it also sounds like it was something so spiritual where it was like just coming through you and you were just listening
Yes.
and open to what was there.
Yeah, yeah. And that's why, it was just kind of ethereal to me. If, the front cover, just with self sitting on this kind of, it's like supposed to be an Appalachian like valley, and it's on a hill and there's clouds and there's the sky, and these doors are kind of lifting, right? And some are touching the earth, you know, ones that we have, easier access to or that are closer to us, and then ones that we haven't gotten to know,
Yeah.
but they're there, right?
And some of them, I highly recommend you guys get this book. It's called The Parts Inside of Me. And so there are these doors all over this front cover, and we're going to do our best to try to describe this book to you, but I highly recommend you just go buy it and then re-listen to the podcast once you have it in your hands. Um, but there are these doors, and one thing that I think is really interesting about the doors too, they're all different colors, but one
Mhm.
of them has like 10 locks on it.
Yes, yes. Yeah, there's about 10 on there, and that is a just do not enter.
Yeah, right.
Do not enter, and
Yeah.
sometimes we have parts of us that, don't want to be accessed, and and in the beginning, they want nothing to do
Yeah.
with having somebody else help them.
Yeah.
They're so used to doing what they do on their own,
Yeah,
you know?
especially thinking of busy parts, right? Busy parts work really hard, and so I
Yeah,
imagine that they don't step down easily.
totally, totally. It's hard to give up for some parts that role.
Yeah.
It's
Yeah.
really, really hard. And then we just showed self kind of like with this key kind of hovering over its hand, because with self, we have access to our parts. And so we have the key, right? We have the way of accessing these parts
Mm,
and
I love
opening
it.
the door.
One of the other things I love about this book is the consistency that runs through it, like the doors, the self, and the lights. So
Yeah.
talk about the lights.
Yeah. So I was so blessed to have, it's a shout out to my illustrator, Mark Savona. Is a scholastic illustrator. We got super lucky with getting him on the project. And one of the many things that he said that just like was just like for me, it was just like, whoa, was he said, I tried to make the colors of self as complementary as possible because self is the antithesis of conflict. And so he made
Mm,
the, self to be really colorful and light and kind of clear,
mm.
because self is, and also there's, you notice it's kind of, there's no gender assigned to it,
Oh,
right?
yeah, yeah.
And it's just kind of, self is timeless,
Mm,
and then when we're in the presence of self, there is so much light that's shedding
mm.
on kind of the darkness and things that we don't see yet,
Yeah, yeah.
right?
Yeah, it's amazing that I'm like, right, it is clear. Like, how do you
Yeah,
draw clear? I don't know, but that is great description of what
yeah,
self looks like. Wow.
yeah. And I literally told him kind of what I wanted, but I didn't know, like, I wasn't completely sure of how I wanted that to look. And I said, I'm imagining more colors. And he said, so am I. And then he also, if you see self, there's always this white light or spark around the heart area, and it's just such a heart-centered model. And so it's really fitting
Yeah.
for self to have that presence of light,
Mm.
just within it and also near the heart, I thought.
Yeah, that's fantastic. Right, because my eye goes right there. My eye goes right to the heart and the light,
Oh,
the like sparkly light. And
yes.
then tell me about the light, like sort of the sparkly lights that are all over the page that are
Yeah.
going even to the doors and are spread all the way out.
Yeah, I'm glad that you asked about that. And that's just the presence of self. Self has such an amazing presence. That was one of the early things in learning IFS that, there were really two takeaways for me. There was, the amazing presence of a self and the bigness of its presence, right? So that light
Mhm.
is signifying the bigness of its presence and just really shining light on things that we haven't been able to see before. And the second thing was really that my emotions, like, I don't have to be scared of them. They aren't in my way, they actually are the way.
Okay, talk about that. Wow.
Yeah. So they
Yeah,
aren't
that's
in my
great.
way, they are the way. They are the portal, they are the door into the immediacy of the moment and what's going on. If you think about it, how you feel is a portal, an entryway into the present moment.
Yeah.
Great
Yeah.
invitation. And instead of looking at like, oh my goodness, like all this is coming up, like, what if we can just, let it be a guide and a teacher to us, and if we can be with it, like, learn, like, emotion has motion, like, it's meant to move. And like, let's follow it so that we can actually be with it,
Mm,
be in relation with it, not ignoring it or kicking it aside, which is what a lot of pre-IFS people do,
yeah.
right?
Yeah.
but just actually letting our parts be our teachers, our emotions be our teachers.
Right. To be like, this is a door. The door is my emotion. I'm curious about what this door is and why it's here.
Yeah.
And self has the key. And so I'm going to go
Right,
explore a little bit.
right, 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 right.
Good.
Right. You
Good.
go on a little bit of an excursion,
Which I feel like
throughout
is a
the
little
book.
bit of what your book is.
It is.
Sorry. Get to.
It is. It's really like this like tour, you know,
I love it. It's a tour of
tour.
your system.
It's a tour of my system,
Yeah.
and the more that we can get to know these parts and integrate them, it allows us to be whole. And when that happens, what I discovered is that like self-care is healthcare, and the fight ends when you can integrate these parts of yourself. The fight ends, and
Mm.
anything that was weighing the system down before begins to kind of lighten and brighten,
Mm.
and shifts begin to happen. A person begins to blossom. And Dick's words, you do become the one that you've been waiting for. It felt like just so right to me to dedicate the book to the IFS community, Tammy, because I just felt so liberated
Mm.
by this model and the incredible people that are part of your journey in this unblend and discovering yourself.
Yeah.
We have such an amazing community, and it was like I didn't have to think about it too long. It was like I want to dedicate it to the IFS
Mm.
community. Every time I see that, if I look at the book, I just love seeing that. It's my way of honoring the community at large. And if you look at the epigraph at the beginning of the book before the forward, it's a quote by Dick Schwartz, and it really kind of like sets the tone for the book. And that quote, and you won't find it in very many places, but somewhere I was digging and I found it, and I reached out to him and said, "Please, please, please, can I put this in the book?" And he said, "That would be great." So the quote is, "If you love what's in your way, they will transform.
Mm.
Our
Mm.
parts will transform
Mm.
as you begin to open up compassion for them." And so that really kind of like really, really sets the tone, as I said, for the book. And you just meet these kind of different parts of me
Yeah.
in this book. The doors, like, we talked about, are significant. One of the things I've heard and, is if you notice in the book, it is darker in the beginning, because so many things are unknown.
Mm.
That was the significance of that, not to like scare people, but sometimes we have parts that we're like, ooh, who is this?
Yeah.
But as the book kind of, as we read along, it really does lighten and brighten,
Mm.
right? And it's illuminating what we don't know, right?
I love all these like things that someone probably wouldn't even know or pay attention, like wouldn't even notice, but it's like
Yes.
taking them on this journey, like all these little things. So there's a poem that you've written, and then every like on each page or two pages of the spread, there's the poem and then this incredible illustration. So
Yes.
it starts with self, which is this clear presence with a little bit of color and a lot of light, and there are doors going all around the head.
Yes.
Yeah.
Yes. Several doors to signify several parts
Yeah.
that we
Yeah.
could meet, right?
Yeah, or could be in your way, right? You're like, these
Yes.
doors are in my way. Yeah.
Yes, yes, yes. And then we just kind of start meeting some of the characters of my parts. And I think that it was really so helpful for me to be able to get a visual of my system and to
Mm.
be able to see how my parts were showing up. There's certain, I would say, parts of it that are pieces of the story that are really powerful. And, on the like page 7 and 8, it talks about we don't really choose our inner family. It just kind of is. And we, just like you can't choose your family, you you can't really choose your inner family in a sense. And at first there's kind of this tug of war, and you feel kind of flooded by, this tug of war going on inside. And then that fight just starts to kind of alleviate in a way. That tension becomes less tense, but it's tense, and it's kind of tense in the beginning. It feels like.
Okay, let me just say, kind of tense. This picture actually brings up a lot of anxiety as I'm looking at it.
Yeah.
It's like this darkness on both sides of these hills, and there
Yes.
are parts on both sides, and they're playing this tug of war, and the sky is black in this orange color, and the
Yes.
trees are black and looming, and
Yes.
it's very, you can feel the tension, you can feel the
Yes.
conflict and the screaming and the pointing fingers. Like
Yes.
there is a lot of commotion.
Yeah, there's a lot of polarity going on there, you know.
Yeah.
And you're right. We wanted to really be able to show that the conflict that people can feel in the beginning,
Yeah.
because it's really new when you go inside.
When they already feel it, right? They just don't have words for it, or they just don't have an image for it, or
Great
a
point. Yeah,
structure for it, but they already feel it, right? They already feel
totally,
this pull, and they're frustrated with themselves. And right, I mean, as we know from this COVID
totally.
thing, we don't have to leave our house. We just have to be in ourselves to be frustrated and angry, and all
Yeah,
that stuff can just be happening already inside of us.
absolutely, absolutely. Yes, and so yeah, and all the feelings that come up around COVID, I guarantee that first of all, we're going to have feelings, and they're not there to be stifled,
Oh yeah.
and
Yeah.
they're there to be heard. And
Mm.
so luckily I was able to. It would have been interesting writing a book during like COVID, but I got to write it really before COVID. And I would say just the next one that stands out to me is, and it's another kind of like, it's on page 11 and 12. It's another, don't you think, like another like picture and words just around conflict,
Right, the image itself, like as soon as you turn the page, you have this feeling of
Yeah,
like, oh yeah. So
yeah.
do you want to describe a little bit about what's happening on these
Yeah,
pages?
yeah. It talks about, a part that's quick to raise its brow, and it's asking, whose side are you on now? And it's just pointing. And there's all these people in the crowd that have their like, fists up, so
Yeah.
there's a lot of tension. And on one side, you see a sign that says no one's listening,
Yeah.
and another side that's all are welcome.
Mm,
Right? And then
mhm.
self is just behind this male figure that looks like a politician,
Mhm.
and self is just kind of observing. It's just very, very present, and you can see the little kind of stardust lights all
Yeah.
over, right? To
I
show
love
the presence,
that.
of self.
Mm,
So I thought this one just, there is so much, there's a lot of tension going on right now in so many ways. And so I think it's just a really powerful image.
yeah. Would you mind reading? It is
Yeah,
interesting, right? Because you didn't write this during COVID, but it's interesting how this is like
no, right?
so yeah. Could you
All
mind
right.
reading what you wrote there? It's
Yeah.
beautiful.
I have a part in me that's quick to raise its brow, and it asks me repeatedly, whose side are you on now? There's one who wants to fight and tightens up its fists. Its rage is an inferno that no one can resist. And the story kind of goes on, and it, looks at parts that, oftentimes for people, there's a taskmaster, and there's a part that has a list of what we need to do. And there's always another part on the receiving end of
Mm,
that list, and that, you got to do this and you got to do that, and so the taskmaster is a strong part of me. And I have a little exile that like really is on the receiving end of, oh,
mm,
you didn't get that done. You need to do this. And it has carried these beliefs that if you don't, if you don't perform, if you don't do these things, then you aren't good enough.
Yeah.
So the strive becomes really great.
Right. Right.
Yeah.
Well, in that part, probably I have a similar part, so I can maybe speak for mine, but mine are the part that believes she isn't good. She just isn't good enough. So
Yes.
if I'm not good enough, then the protector works so hard so that I don't
Oh
have to
yeah.
feel that. I don't have to feel her
Oh
not
yeah.
good enough feeling.
Oh yeah. And
Yeah.
just to show you the polarity with that taskmaster is I have like a part that would almost look like, and it's really looked like if you go to page, it's a little bit later, but like 23 and 24. Um, you
Yeah.
know, I have had in my past a suicidal part. I've had a part that is very firefighter-ish, that's like, I don't want to do anything. I am so freaking tired. And that is what happens when that overachieving part and taskmaster takes over for too long without self being part of it. Then there's just this completely worn out part that just wants to escape or
Yeah.
get away. You know what I mean? And I think about it, this is something really near and dear to my heart. And I told Dr. Schwartz this too. Like, just I think about the youth right now, and there's so much suicide and a lot of firefighter type parts that just don't know. They don't know any other way to numb or to get away from their feelings, but to take some really extreme measures.
Yeah.
And these 2 pages really illustrate that. And I'll just read it. 23 and 24. There is a part of me who wants to change its route. It second guesses my worth and tries to snuff me out. And then it talks about, a know-it-all part and the fear of people finding out that it doesn't know very much at all.
Mm.
And this was a neat spread for me because you can see the book. You are the one you've been waiting for. This boy is in a library and he's reading this book, and there's a hand, this just like scary hand kind of coming out from behind him, and Self is kind of meeting palm to palm with the hand,
Mm.
and there's an interaction helping, going on there for the audience to really interpret, but Self is present, and this kid is kind of looking over his shoulder in a way. And the book he's reading is actually a book that my father wrote, but it's not published. And my father actually passed away over a year ago, which has been such a interesting journey for my parts around grief. And so we had this kid reading the book that, the story, he wrote a spoofy Halloween story for kids. And so he's reading that, and it's just my way to immortalize, my father. And we have some of those, Mark calls them little Easter eggs, things that you plant in the book to kind of immortalize people that have maybe gone, that have been significant, or people that have been part of this model that are really, really significant contributors to the book.
I love it. And I love that this is a library. Like, the details in this is incredible, that it's a library and you're talking about the know-it-all. I would never put the know-it-all and the part that wants to snuff me out, but
Yeah.
you do it beautifully in this picture. Like, right?
Yeah. Like, talk about, yeah.
And it's interesting, the polarizations, right? This part that needs to know it all and wants to be a know-it-all, and then this part that then wants to kill me, right?
Yeah.
It's interesting that happens that way.
Yeah. Like that I don't care. I just don't care anymore.
Yeah, I need out. I just need a
Yeah.
break. Yeah.
I need a break. Yeah.
I love also that the parts that there are so many, there's similar parts, like the ones that are at the beginning, you see them throughout and you see them transform. That's what
Yeah.
you talk about at the beginning, is I can see them as being scary, like I'm scared of them, or they're overwhelming at the beginning, right? They're dark, and then they transform through the book, and then
Yes.
they become something very different at the end.
Yes. And I just, as we look kind of towards the end, all of these spreads are, and the words are near and dear to my heart, you know.
I know, I
Um,
wish I could. I'm like, I want to go page by page with you so
I know,
badly because it's
I know it.
incredible.
I know it, and I hope people do get a chance to read it, because it was such a big unblend for me that I just want to inspire others to be able to have a similar unblend when they read it. Like, they're going to read it and they may have parts that go, oh, mine's kind of like that, but it's a little bit different, or I don't have that one. Just getting curious, and for people to have like their own creative outlets to find like ways for them, which we are seeing a lot of that in our community, like such a creative community, like finding ways to get to know your parts in a really meaningful way.
Right, so even if people read it and they don't have similar parts, which I think people will have similar parts in some way, but even if they
Yeah,
don't have similar parts, they can be drawn into this example of how they can externalize their parts, whether it's with
right.
poetry or writing or drawing or
Yes.
painting or collaging. I made a collage earlier today, which is
Oh,
just for fun, which I would have never done before, but it was just like, yeah,
wow.
like someone in my office was giving away magazines and I was like, I'll take these home. And yeah, so just different things to
I
do
love that.
to, yeah, I love it. Right. So it's your story and it's your
Yeah,
process, but it's
yeah,
also an invitation for other people to be curious about their parts and to
right,
find ways to externalize them.
right. And discover the parts inside of them,
Yeah, yeah.
parts inside
Mm,
of them. And I love just the how it gets brighter like towards the end. And if you look on page like 35 and 36, um, I just love the end of the book so much. It says, we have a wiser self that stays above the fray, and it's able to take the lead on any given day. I
mm,
now know its presence, its energy is calm, and it aims to help my parts find ways to get along. And Tammy, in this spread, like, all these like characters that were in these parts that were in conflict before are really like, in harmony. And we see Self, and he's kind of planting kind of a plant in the ground, and one of the parts is just kind of watching them. They're smiling, they're touching each other, they're, just, there's such a connection. And I think of Self as just like, Self is, this book is like an ode to self,
mm,
you know,
yeah.
because Self is always like, it's able to stay outside of the chaos.
Mm,
It really is able to stay above the fray. And it helps, like, Self helps kind of water, kind of nourish or water the seeds, I think, for our parts,
mm,
and to help nourish our parts as parts get in the presence and in the light of Self. They embody more light,
yeah,
they embody more clarity,
yeah.
and there's truth and there's understanding for that, and enlightenment, and so we can really just kind of see the shift, I think, that happens towards the end of the book. And the book is about radical love, learning to love yourself,
Mm.
taking that giant leap to love yourself instead.
Yeah, I mean, and the differences you see on people's faces, like there's lightness, but it's also there's brightness and smiling and touching and openness and cheer
Yeah.
and joy and um
Yes.
yeah, and the brightness of their eyes, like what a difference from
Yeah.
the beginning of the book to the
Isn't
end.
it? Yeah,
Yeah.
it really is. It really, really is. And, the book is really, it's obviously got personal meaning, but there's also a universal meaning
Yeah.
to it, and it's about, outer compassion. If we can have compassion for our own parts and understand and accept them, then we can, Tammy, lead from self in learning to love and accept and extend compassion for other people.
Tell me about this last page because it's so
I love it.
it's incredible. My
Yeah, it's
gosh.
probably one of my favorites, this last page. And you see the characters all kind of in the air. It's an aerial kind of view. And they're all in like a circle, and Self is in the middle and touching its heart. And so they're just kind of encircling around self, and there's significance to that. And then you see, like, just beneath them, like they're in the air, but like beneath them is just like the tapestry, like all these colors, and just the earth beneath them. And there's this golden thread that's beautifully intertwined around them, and they're all connected. And that was kind of a nod to Michi Rose, who's just an amazing force in our community. That was a way to kind of immortalize her. And I do that with Dick too. But she has this technique called the golden thread, where when we typically how it works is when we meet an exile, and we want to make sure it's safe, and we want to work with the protectors, we can send a golden thread to that little exile and be in connection with it, so it doesn't feel like it's like hanging, right? Or on its own. And so we connect with the golden thread, and then we kind of come back to those protectors. And in this, I did a spin-off of that with them all connected, all of them connected to each other. And I'll just read it. It says, "I am the way I am. It's clear for all to see how much I completely love the parts inside of me. The world could be a kind place. What a gift if we can believe that the parts you see in others might reside in you and me."
What's the sign for Dick, or what's the ode to Dick in here?
He talked about wanting to maybe at some point have a bumper sticker that was self heals. And on the larger gentleman in the book, on his, actually the soles of his the soles of his feet, if you look really closely, on the left one it says self, and then on the right one it says heals.
That is awesome. I love it.
And I have and in that one picture earlier, I had his book, and I got his permission to just have that little book there. Yeah, I just got permission to do a bunch of stuff, but and so it's just a neat way to be able to honor just such amazing people. And I thanked in my acknowledgement so many people that were just part of this process, and I have just so much respect for the lead and assistant trainers. I just want to say that. Yeah. Because just the amount of, you can see it when you're with them, the amount of presence that you have to be able to be present for everybody's parts. All of our little exiles, when we come to level 1, level 2, level 3, like they do such extraordinary work. And I just have so much respect for them. And I don't think we could have better teachers and models for how to actually do the work.
Yeah.
And I'm just so grateful.
I'm grateful for you for writing this incredible book.
Oh, I'm grateful for you, Tammy. I really am.
Well, I appreciate you. I get to go first. I appreciate you because you've always been incredibly friendly and kind and warm to me. And that people that are warm and nice are that's the best values to me. If you're a warm, nice person, I love you. And if you're not, well,
I'm in the circle of trust.
You are, for sure. Ever since I met you in the bathroom. Do you remember when I met you in the bathroom?
At the conference.
Yes.
Of course how can I forget that, Tammy? Yeah, I absolutely remember that. And I was so excited because I was this super fan of your podcast, the one inside. And I told so many people about your podcast. And I just think, to echo what, others have said, you're doing great work in the world, and you're contributing so much to our community, and your voice is just very necessary. So I was super honored to be asked to do this.
Thank you so much. I have to ask you my last question.
Yes.
So if you weren't doing all the stuff that you were doing, what would you do instead?
it's so similar to what we really do. But some type of humanitarian work, or missionary work. And we do that so much. Because the best gift you can give humanity is your wholeness and humanness.
Mm.
And we repair the world by repairing ourselves. And so I would just, any way to give back would be what I would gravitate towards. And also, I love to write. And so this is really a different genre for me. I love to write children's stories. And so I would hope that I would continue to write children's books.
Well, Shelly, thank you so much. This was
Oh,
fantastic.
you're so welcome, Tammy.
Thanks for hanging out today. If you liked this episode, make sure you subscribe. And if you really like this episode, share it with a friend and leave a review. You can follow me on Instagram at IFS Tammy and join our community on Facebook at the One Inside Podcast. Talk to you next time.